Hello. First of all, I'm going to be talking about food and health in a few videos. I've already done some videos and I'm going to be doing more. I was diagnosed with fairly bad atherosclerosis, which is a combination of narrowing of the heart, which is called arteriosclerosis, as well as plaque buildup. Not the heart, I'm sorry, the arteries. And atherosclerosis is plaque building up in those arteries. So I have atherosclerosis that is worse than at least half the men my age, up to 74%, somewhere in that range. Don't know exactly, but it didn't look good. The calcification scan that I had done on me was quite different from the results that I had from the stress test with the USG. Now, with the stress test with the USG, that's not actually going to show you whether you've got plaque buildup, and it isn't going to be a very good indicator of some of the things that we might associate with stress tests. If you start having pain while you're doing a stress test, now that would be a clear indication that you have got something seriously wrong. But stress tests are to measure function, to evaluate how well your heart is functioning. And so I actually watched the USG of my heart. It's very, very interesting to see the valves and stuff and the flow and all that kind of stuff. Sorry. But ultimately, that test came back as, other than some mild regurgitation in one area, they said that my heart function was great. It was just no problem. So if I had only done the stress test, and that was what had been recommended by my cardiologist initially, I would have walked away not realizing how much trouble I'm in. I wouldn't know about the atherosclerosis. See, I don't eat a lot of meat. I don't deliberately consume a lot of saturated fats and cholesterol. But, you know, with the past year, me doing all these reviews of foods, I have been eating differently. And in addition to that, maybe 3 years ago, my doctor had a lab done on me and said, "Oh, you're eating too many legumes." And I was like, "I didn't know you could eat too many legumes," but I was drinking like soy milk because I'm lactose intolerant. Now, before I continue, I just have to say this. I'm not a medical expert. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a dietitian. Maybe someday I'll be a nutritionist, but not right now. I'm just sharing what I'm learning with everybody else. So, fortunately, my cardiologist, who doesn't know anything about nutrition, and admitted such, did say to me, I would recommend that you get a calcification scan. And that's basically an MRI of the heart area of your heart to see if there's any buildup of plaque. And I was like, well, how's that gonna help? Well, he said, well, calcium gets trapped in the plaque too. And the scan, just like an MRI scan can see your bones, it can see calcium in the plaque and give the doctors an estimation of how serious the problem is. And so that's how I found out. And actually, the doctor had told me, well, it's not going to be free, and the insurance company probably won't cover it. And I was like, okay, well, how much? And he said, about probably $100. And I said, well, okay, it's worth that. It's worth more than that for me to have to pay for it. But let's see what happens. So we did those both, and the insurance company covered my stress test, which was useless. And I'm not saying stress tests are always useless, but in evaluating my condition, it was useless. But it did tell me my heart function is normal, except for I have PACs, PVCs, and VTs. That was found with EKGs and a heart monitor that I had to wear for a week on my sternum, or breastbone, chest bone here, the middle bone here. So between the EKG and the calcification scan, I found out what's going on. Now, PAC is premature articular contraction, and PVC is premature ventricular contraction, and VT is ventricular tachycardia, or tachy meaning speed and cardia meaning heart. So my heart was beating too fast. So I would feel palpitations where it felt like my heart was pausing and then would beat. But what was actually happening is one pump was weak and then the next one was quite strong, so I felt it and heard it, and normally you don't feel what your heart is doing, but when that happens you do feel something, and that it can be an indication of, say for example, the type of food that you're eating. Like too much chocolate can do that to me, or caffeine can help to trigger that. Also, it can be medications. Like there are medications that have a tendency to cause palpitations. And like loratadine is one, and if you are taking an internal fungal medicine like miconazole or ketoconazole or something like that, that can also potentially cause that. Now, it doesn't happen to everybody, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, potentially. And I had that happen with medication for me, as well as sources of caffeine, including chocolate. So, now, in thinking about it, I thought, well, part of the problem is probably the past year in which I have been eating a lot of stuff that I don't normally eat. I've been eating a lot of snacks. I've been eating a lot more meat than I normally do, consuming a lot more things that had stuff in it that I wasn't paying attention to as far as health is concerned. And I never intended to do that. It was, I just did it in the effort to provide reviews for people. Keeping that in mind, after my doctor had said I was eating too many legumes, I looked at the fact, well, I'm drinking soy milk because I'm lactose intolerant, pretty much 100%. I stopped drinking soy milk. And I tried almond milk, which was, I didn't like it a lot, and I tried some other milks, and I didn't like them. But then I found some sweetened coconut milk, and I was like, ooh, this is good. I like the flavor of, that dry coconut flavor. I like that flavor, and that coconut milk had that, and it was a bit sweet, so not very sweet, but a bit sweet. And so it was very enjoyable to me. And so since that time, I was almost always drinking, and I should say, not always, but almost always drinking that coconut milk, and got to the point where it was my favorite, and I didn't want to, I wasn't really as happy when I had to substitute something else, like soy or oat or flaxseed or almond or hemp seed or whatever the other ones, and admittedly they don't all taste wonderful. Some of them taste kind of horrible, but I realized, and I guess I've never heard a lot about whether coconut oil or palm oil or coconut milk or coconut cream are bad or good for you, but I've discovered after doing a little research that coconut, if you have the milk or the cream, there are some good things about it, but there are also bad things about it, like the high saturated fat. And so ultimately, it's a wash. It's a balance between good and bad. It's not horrible for you. It's not great for you, theoretically. However, my family has a predisposition to heart disease, hypertension, and plaque buildup, and heart attacks, and stuff like that. So, in my case, I was feeding something that was genetically predisposing me to problems. And because of all that saturated fat and the other problems with it, bad news. Now, coconut oil comes from the coconut milk or cream, whatever you want to call it. And the way they get it is they heat up the milk, and that causes the oil to separate from the other ingredients. Now that makes it more stable for frying and stuff like that, but it's lost all of the beneficial ingredients, or almost all the beneficial ingredients that you find in coconut milk, and has all the bad ones, or most of them anyways. So it's got most of the saturated fats, it's got most of this other stuff that's bad for you. I wasn't using coconut oil, but I was eating coconut milk. And I also like coconut cookies, macaroons, and stuff like that. And I was, I coconut candies. I like, Mounds, for example, and Almond Joy. So I was occasionally eating coconut cookies and candies, and I was using coconut milk in some of my cooking, and it tastes very nice. But so I realized, oh dear, between my reviews and the coconut products that I've been using, I'm putting my heart at risk. So I just wanted to share this with you so that you understand. And before I go, I wanted to explain one more thing. A coconut tree is a type of palm tree. Now, a lot of us, I think, have the misconception that a coconut tree is different from a palm tree. But if you look at them physically, they look very, very similar. It's just that the fruit that they bear is different. So if you look at coconut trees, you see, now when they're ripe, it's this very large green fruit. If you go to the grocery store, at least when I was a young person and I went to the grocery store, when I saw coconuts, I thought the coconut I saw in the grocery store was the real thing. But they take the outer husk off before they ship it from wherever it's being grown to here. So what you see in the grocery store, or used to see, is this round, brown, hairy ball. And hairy as in fibrous, like thick fibers sticking out everywhere. And not an actual coconut. You saw the fiber surrounding the very, very hard wooden shell that protects the meat and the coconut water. So I thought that's what a coconut looked like, and when I went to Indonesia, I discovered what a coconut really looks like. Now, when the coconut starts to get old, it starts to turn yellow, and eventually it will turn brown. The best coconut water is from a green coconut. It's not so tasty when it's a yellow coconut, or if it's not been freshly harvested. It also tends to get sour very rapidly, especially if it's sitting in the sun. If it's brown, you don't want to drink it at all because it just doesn't taste good at all. But when it's green, it's effervescent or bubbly, and it has a very refreshing sensation, a very pleasant flavor. It's just amazing. And the good thing about coconut water is, to my knowledge, coconut water has lots of electrolytes in it, and it's good for health. It doesn't have a lot of saturated fat or anything like that. So it's actually the only part of the coconut that we can be relatively confident in consuming without concern for health. And coconut sugar comes from the water. So therefore, well, it's a refined sugar, so that's a bad thing. But compared to other options like a white sugar, it's better than that. It does contain impurities that give it the brown color. Also, that makes it have a stronger flavor, which can sometimes interfere with what you're trying to achieve if you're like baking or especially baking, because it'll alter the flavor. But in cooking, it's not a big deal. But again, the health risks of coconut milk, cream, and oil are not present in coconut water and coconut sugar to a large degree. So I wanted you to understand that, and I also want to reiterate, I am not a medical professional, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm just learning because at 55, with a family history of heart disease, I don't want to have my children become orphans before they're even adults. I think it would be very selfish of me to do otherwise. So I'm going to turn this around by becoming, I'm going to ease into the life of a vegan again. And I'm pretty healthy, so I'm not concerned about making the switch. Yesterday I went to the grocery store and I only bought fresh fruits and vegetables, and that was a huge amount of space in my refrigerator. And my son and he got very excited because he's decided for his own health needs that he's also going to join me in this diet, although he may not give up meat. But he's also lactose intolerant. And so he was very excited, and he helped me to make the juice. And I was very surprised. I didn't think he was going to be so enthusiastic about it. But when I talked to him about health, and I talked to him about eating well, eating correctly, that is to say, he jumped on board, and I didn't even ask him to. I just told him this is what I'm going to be doing, and this is why I'm going to be doing it. And I talked to him about my grandfather dying of heart disease. I talked to him about my uncle dying of a massive heart attack that fried his brain. And I talked about my dad having to have open heart surgery and how I felt seeing my dad looking white as a ghost after the surgery and everything like that. So he just jumped on board of his own volition. And I said to him yesterday, I said, look, are you doing this because of me, my health? or are you trying to be supportive, or is this something you really want to do for yourself? He said, I want to do this for myself. So I'm very happy that my son is at least going to try to improve his diet, because he has been a big carnivore. I mean, when he was in his mama's belly, when she was still very early on in her pregnancy, she was demanding lots of meat, whereas with my daughter, she demanded lots of fruits and vegetables and stuff. And he's always really, really, really loved meat. I mean, it's just insane. I actually have to insist that he eat vegetables before he eats his meat, because if he doesn't, sometimes he'll eat so much meat that he won't want his vegetables. So I said to him, no, no meat until your vegetables are gone. And he's like, oh. But, he was very enthusiastic about it, and we worked on it together, and we got it to the point where he was like, oh, this tastes good. And it actually had, surprisingly, although I put it in an apple, and when I tasted it after putting in the apple, and I think I had a mango in there, couldn't really, it was okay, it wasn't that great, but then we put in, I think a plum, and some other fruit, one other fruit, and then when we tasted it, he was like, oh, I like this, it's pretty good. And so he drank it, and I drank a big portion of it, and my daughter even had some, although she hasn't volunteered to join us in our diet change, but I hope she will. So I hope that the information I will provide in the ensuing videos will be of use to you, and I thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe if you can. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks.